Okay, so hello, hi. This is the first video on this channel, and so yes, I'd like to welcome you because, this is the beginning. This is it, right? I'm starting this channel because sometimes I like to talk about things, and I guess YouTube is the best place because who else am I going to talk to, right? Now, I don't have any plans on adding any visuals to these videos, so it's just gonna be a black screen. So like you can listen to this while doing other things, and I might add visuals in the future if people want it. But in reality, this is gonna have like 2 subs max, so it doesn't really matter because that's not what we're here for, right? But without delaying anymore, let's talk about the subject of this video, which would be Her Majesty's Canadian ship Onondaga. And I've looked on YouTube, but there's not really any videos of her about like who she was, right? Who the boat was. It's just about the museum. So I figured I'm gonna make a video and a quick history lesson about her because she's a good ship or submarine, I guess. But I think submarines are ships. Doesn't matter. And I think she deserves something, even though she's quite privileged already because like she got preserved and a lot of other ships didn't. But let's get started. So Onondaga, named after the Onondaga First Nation tribe and the only Canadian warship to ever be named after that tribe, is an Oberon-class submarine built for the Canadian Navy by the British Navy in Her Majesty's Chatham Dockyard. She is a diesel-electric submarine, meaning that the diesel engines run to power 2 massive generators, and they in charge turn 2 massive batteries. Well, they charge the batteries, and the batteries are what gives power to the submarine. So let's say for your air conditioning, that's from the batteries, from the engines, that's from your batteries, right? Not the diesel engines, but I mean like the screws to turn the propellers, right? That is from the batteries. So diesel electric, that's where the names come from. Now, I don't want this video to turn into the story of the Oberon class because the Oberon classes are also interesting, and I feel like I might make a video about them in the future. So right now, we're only gonna stick to Onondaga. Right, hope you guys agree. Okay, anyways, Onondaga was one of the 3 Oberons that were commissioned in the Canadian Navy. Olympus and Orisis were acquired, but they were not commissioned. Like, they were only training vessels, so I'm not going to count them. But if you do count them, you could say that there were 5 Oberons acquired, but only 3 were commissioned, so yeah. Onondaga was specifically modified for usage by the Canadian Navy. And by this, I mean that she received an enlargement of snow de-icers because, it's cold here. She received a bigger air conditioning unit and an active sonar, which was the Type 187 active passive sonar, the Type 2007 passive sonar, and the Type 2019 regular sonar. So a lot of different sonars, but I guess she's specialized, right? And she also received communications equipment for the Canadian Navy, so different from the rest of the communications equipment on the other Oberons, which is super interesting. Her weapons bay was also changed for some more complex weapon systems because, torpedoes. And also she did a lot more training exercises. I don't think she ever fired a real torpedo at anything. So I guess, a weapons bay for that. But the weapons bay change also made them remove 3 bunks. So when the crew was on board, they had to set up their bunks in the torpedo room because there wasn't enough already placed in because, they wanted to be fancy. So I guess that's good. But after her critics were met, she was accepted and commissioned into the Canadian Navy on June 22nd, 1967, and received the number S-73, as for the designation of submarine. With a beam of 26.5 feet, draw of 18 feet, and displacement of 2,410 tons underwater, she was no small ship or submarine, Displacing 2,410 tons of water, that's a pretty big boat for those times, but not a boat, submarine. I think boat still applies, doesn't matter anyways. Onondaga would start her career for the Canadian Navy assigned to Marland, or the Maritime Forces of the Atlantic, as part of the 1st Canadian Submarine Squadron. And she would spend the rest of her life in the North Atlantic. She would go down to the Caribbean a few times and go to the West Coast, but other than that, most of her time all on the Atlantic. So starting in the late 60s, Onondaga would regularly participate in exercises with the Royal Navy, the British Navy, to better train her crew and help her specialize in roles she would do. One of this was intelligence gathering, so while she was with the Royal Navy, she would try to collect their information and see if she could. So that way both navies learned from each other, That's a good program. In the 70s, Onondaga started doing underwater patrols on the North Atlantic looking for any Soviet ships or submarines. So this was during the Cold War and they needed a boat to patrol. So Onondaga would go out there, she would patrol, see a submarine, see a surface vessel, and she would like talk to planes and radio stations that may enter her waters, taking down their position and reporting it until it could be surveyed by other means. So she would like shadow them, and then eventually someone else would find them, and then they would be monitored from there. But that was basically her role. And she would never engage unless necessary. And fortunately, she never had to shoot any of her torpedoes. So yeah, only shadow them. She helped locate many vessels that may or may not have been detected with her. So without Onondaga, maybe some more submarines would have slipped through the cracks, you know. So really good thing that she was there. Starting in the late 70s, though, Onondaga, along with the rest of the Oberons, were starting to become obsolete. Their stealth technology, sonar, and weapons could not compete against the new flashy ships developed by other countries, and something had to be done. So she was not stealthy anymore, she was not that quiet compared to other things, and we needed to make her better. So after planning, in 1978, they submitted a proposal to refurbish her and all the other Oberons, and it was accepted in 1979. New sonars, better periscopes, fire control systems, all the shebang, all would be added to it. So now, with the new infrastructure too for the new American Mark 48 torpedo, which is by the way still in service, would all be planned and they would all be getting added. So midlife refit, we're getting better. Unfortunately though, the Mark 48 torpedoes would only be acquired in 1985. So for the time being, we had to stick with the old torpedoes. But it's okay, it's okay. Onondaga would arrive in Halifax on the 18th of January 1982 and began her refit on the 25th of June in the following year, so 1983. She would get completed in April of 1984 and re-entered service with the Canadian Navy. So now she was a brand new ship and she was considered fully fit for duty after that refit, which was good, right? Because we saved a submarine. She would serve the rest of the 80s until the 1991. Why did I say the 1991? I mean, until 1991, doing her patrols, But then the Cold War ended. So now there was no longer a need for her to detect enemy ships. So now what she would do is she was placed under the command of the forestries and green industry of Canada, and she would go monitor the fisheries to make sure that no one else was, trying to steal the fish. And in 1994, she was sent to the West Coast for 6 months to replace submarines going refit because there was a lack of submarines there and we needed one. So she was sent there, Good for you, Onondaga. And now she was nearing the end of her service life, and the Oberons, they were all getting retired. But the Victoria class submarine that was meant to replace them got delayed because, I guess that just happens over there in Britain. I guess it was not going good to build them. So Onondaga got to participate in one last action during her life, which was to be used as a deterrent during the disputes between the European and the Canadian fisheries during the Turbot War. So, the fisheries in Europe wanted to come fish off the coast of Newfoundland. Canada did not want that. So Onondaga was sent there to say, yo, if you come in our waters, we're going to sink you. So that was her last action. And then finally, in July 2000, after 33 years of service, she was retired as the last of the Oberon-class submarines serving for Canada. Along with her sister ships, she was placed in Halifax Harbor awaiting disposal. In 2001, the Canadian War Museum made plans to cut her into pieces and reassemble her inside the museum, but it was quickly shut down after the price exceeded the budget super high, so they said, you know what, we're going to let it go, we're not doing that. So Onondaga would stay in the Halifax Harbor for 6 years until 2006, when she was finally purchased by the Pointe-au-Père Maritime Site in Rimouski, Quebec, for $4. Yes, you heard that, $4. I mean, the Canadian government wanted to scrap her for $50,000, but they ended up selling her for $4. So they paid $16 million for her, got $4 back. Not a good investment, but she served good. She was towed to the city of Rimouski in 2008, but due to many complications in her travel and even falling over, they had to wait for this really specific day that they would get 15 meters of tide for 15 feet of tide, for only 2 hours, and then they got it, but they didn't fully bring her up, so she fell over on her side. They kept trying it, and then eventually they gave up. She got frozen over, she was stuck in ice, and then finally, when the ice melted away, they were able to get her up, and she was opened in 2009, finally. since then, Onondaga has stayed, and she's brought over 1 million visitors to visit her. So she's pretty attractive bow, I guess. Staying there, 1 million people coming to see you. And yeah, she's definitely worth visiting if you want to know what a submarine is like. So if you've never been in a submarine, I would definitely go visit her. And also, she's an important piece of Canadian history. I mean, she served for Canada for 33 years, kept our waters safe, and she's part of history. She shows submarines, diesel electric. Nowadays, where we all talk about nuclear power this and nuclear power that, she was diesel electric, and she did phenomenally. And also, she stands at a proud 85 feet, and her motto is still unconquered, because she will never be conquered. So thank you for listening to my first ever video on this channel about Her Majesty's Canadian ship Onondaga, and I will hope to see you on our next video, which I don't know what the topic's going to be yet, but we'll think of it. So till later, folks. Thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.